Hi everybody. Welcome to week 12 of our English 3010 online class. I cannot believe how fast the semester is flying by. Here we are. We have about 4 more weeks to go, if you count this week, before we are out of here for the summer. So in this video, there's a couple of things I want to do because we have a lot of things to keep in the back of our brain as we head towards the end of the semester. First thing I want to do in this video is introduce Project 4. So exciting. This is a very fun project, and we're going to address it in some stages and some pieces, so I want to talk to you about that. Second thing I want to do in this video is I want to go over our week's activities as usual. And the third thing I want to do is I want to just go over the showcase information a little bit more and give you a heads up for a discussion thread I'll be posting later this week. All right, so let's get to it. Okay, Project 4, here we go. So this project is what's called a research proposal. It ties in all the work that you've done in Project 3, and it's going to pivot to propose a research study that you as a writer are intending to or planning to do. So if we look at the introduction and rationale, a couple of the things that you'll note is that, of course, we're going to build on what you've already learned about your discourse community, about the ways that it researches and writes, about the way that citation styles work, about how evidence works, what do articles generally look like. All of this knowledge you've been gathering all semester long is going to feed into this proposal. In this project, we want to, like I said, pivot from your literature review where you're mainly talking about what other people are saying. And in Project 4, you're going to propose a study that's going to be something you can say in this conversation in your discourse community. So basically, what does this mean for you? Well, you're going to take your literature review and you're going to frame it first by drawing on the CARS model, which we'll talk about in a second, which is creating a research space to draft an introduction. Now, a lot of you have introductions that you drafted for your literature reviews, which is great. So you're already halfway there. All you'll want to do is revise your introduction to make sure that it follows the CARS model that we'll talk about in a second, and you should be good to go with your introduction. Second, you'll be revising your literature review by adding 2 sources and by, if you didn't do it already, clearly stating what the gap is that you see at the end of your lit review. Third, in Project 4, you're going to propose a study. So this is what we'll call the methods or methodology section, in which you're going to outline for your readers the exact detailed methods that you're going to use. And last but not least, you want to draft a discussion section that talks about the significance, the limitations, the assumptions that come along with, or the problems that might arise with your proposed study. And of course, you'll have your works cited, and you want to include an appendices for any research methods that need documents. For example, if you're going to propose that your study conducts interviews, then you want to include an appendices with your interview questions. So while this is probably the largest project that you've written for me in this class, please keep in mind that you're using almost all of your literature review, or all of it, and you're adding to it. And so that's going to give you a head start. You're already a third of the way there in terms of writing this project. Okay, so One of the things I want to point out before I open up the week 12 activities folder and go over what we're going to do this week, I want to point something out to you in terms of the organization of this entire project, because it's going to be, I think, really helpful to you as you are heading towards the end of the semester. You'll notice here that there are 3 weeks set aside for this project. Now, of course, we've already drafted a full literature review, so that's 3 weeks to draft an introduction, a methods, and a discussion section, which I think is pretty, that's pretty optimal. Now, as you're going through these weeks, please know that I have designed this so that week 12, the week that we're in right now, is going to be for planning. So thinking about and planning out the study methods that you're going to use. It's going to be for finding your next 2 sources and for organizing those sources. And we're going to use Cornell Notes in particular to do some of that organization. So this week might feel kind of lightweight to you because we're not doing any heavy-duty drafting, but I really want to encourage everyone to use this week. It is here for you to organize all your sources, find your 2 new sources, and plan out your methods. Now, speaking of your 2 new sources, I do want to make a note that some of you have already talked to me about difficulty finding sources, or maybe you've found sources, but one of the gaps that you've identified is that there isn't that much research out there on the topic that you're interested in. And that's okay. In fact, as scholars, that's what we love. We love to find a gap that we can then fill with our own research. So that's fantastic if you're feeling like you've noticed a gap in the research and it's exactly what you want to do. When it comes to finding 2 new sources, here's what I would suggest. First of all, I would suggest looking for sources about methods. For example, there are lots of methodological articles out there describing best practices for interview questions or surveys or ethnographic research or any number of empirical research study practices. So one of your new articles could be a methods article that details what you want to do in terms of your methods. Secondly, I would suggest looking in other disciplines. Look to psychology or writing studies or biology or chemistry or wherever you can find research, perhaps that's not in your discourse community, because that can also help you frame your argument for why this is needed in your discourse community. Okay, so now let's look in the week 12 activities folder and see what we're doing this week. So, like I said, it feels maybe deceptively a little light this week because for watching, you want to watch the week 12 video, which you're already doing. Good job. And for reading, I'd like you to read in the Wadsworth Guide, Chapter 8 about developing an argument, and Chapter 9 about selecting and integrating evidence. The other piece of reading would be if you click through this link here, it will pull up a page from the Purdue OWL, which is the online writing lab at Purdue, and it is the handout that details the CARS model, creating a research space. Now, I'm going to come back and walk you through this in just a second, but let's keep on looking at the week 12 activities. So those things are for your reading. In terms of writing, I just would like you to write your weekly response blog. This is your last reading blog of the semester. What? And your project builder for this week is a set of Cornell Notes for at least one source, but perhaps more, maybe your 2 new sources, and your reflection journal to close out the week. So again, there's not a lot of formal drafting to do, but there's a lot of thinking and building that we're going to do this week. And of course, the links for your homework are here underneath your schedule. All right, so let's talk about this creating a research space. This CARS model, what you'll notice here is that it's a model for introductions. This is something put together by good old John Swales, if you remember him from back in the beginning of the semester. This is 3 moves that in all of academic writing, it can be slightly different depending on discourse community, but almost most articles have introductions that make these 3 moves. And so when you're writing your research proposals for Project 4, your introductions should make these 3 moves. So that means if you have an introduction that you're going to be revising from your lit review, from your Project 3A, you want to revise it and make sure that your introduction is doing these 3 things. First of all, establishing a territory. So you can do this in a couple of ways. You can claim the importance of your topic. You can make generalizations about your topic, or you can review items of previous research, or you can do all 3 or some combination of them. Move number 2 is establishing a niche. So this is where you want to, in your introduction, hint at the gap. So either you can talk about disagreements that you have with some of the earlier research. You can, again, indicate or hint at your gap. You can raise some questions that you don't feel like have been raised yet, or you can talk about how you will be continuing in a tradition of research. And then the third move in your introduction is that you want to occupy that space that you just made, occupy the niche. You'll do this at the end of your introduction by outlining your purpose for the study or announcing the research, announcing your principal findings. This is something that we really won't do because this is a research proposal and you don't have any findings yet when you're just proposing. But you can indicate your article structure. So these 3 moves should be present in the introduction for your Project 4. Now, we're going to do some drafting next week, and when you are revising your introduction, there are some excellent questions here that you can take yourself through to help you revise your intro to get it in tip-top shape. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you before I close out this week's video is I want to take you to the resources folder and point out that I have both a sample of Cornell notes, which we'll look at in just a second, but I also have 3 sample Project 4s that you can look at. This one here, example number 3, has a bunch of really helpful annotations put in there by my fellow instructor, Alinka. And this has really great explanations in those notes to kind of help you conceptualize what is going on with Project 4, what it should look like, why things are the way that they are. But example 1 and example 2 are really strong examples from 2 different discourse communities of what a Project 4 should look like, both in terms of organization and in terms of content. Though, I don't think it needs to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway, none of these examples are perfect by any means. So please take note that this isn't necessarily a gold standard, but it's something to look at to help you shape your own Project 4. Okay, so when you open up the sample Cornell notes, just a couple of things I want to point out about how they're laid out and how to set up your notes. First of all, of course, put a citation at the top. Before you get into the notes about the source, make sure you have your citation all correct and complete. This is a great opportunity if you got comments from me on your Project 3A that, hey, are these citations correct? Maybe you should double check. This is the place to make sure that you are using correct and complete, either APA, MLA, CSE, AMA, whatever the style is, that you're using the correct citations for your end text citations. Now, once you've got that all settled, Cornell notes are usually divided into 3 columns, 2 or 3 columns, it depends. But these Cornell notes have 3 columns, and in them they get progressively more metacognitive, a little bit further away from the text. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so in this first column on the left-hand side, this is the place to jot notes as you're reading the source. This is the place for specific details that jump out at you, things that strike you as very important or that help you with your understanding of the piece. So anything from this is evaluating the association between autism and level of immunologic stimulation, or a detail like the age range of the patients that were in the study. And then noting limitations or anything that pops up as you're reading in terms of questions or critiques that you might have. All the details as you're reading go in this left-hand column. Now, the middle column should function a lot like your annotation in an annotated bibliography. So this is like a summary of the entire piece. This source discusses that in early life, there is no link between what is in the vaccines and the risk of autism, right? So 1, 2, 3 sentences to summarize the entire source. Then we get even a little bit further away from the text itself, from those details. We've summarized it. Now it's time to do some metacognitive writing. These are notes to yourself about how you're going to use the source. So this is a lot like the application section of your annotated bibliography, but it's just structured in a different way, and it's a little bit more pithy and kind of almost in like a bullet point form. You can write about how you will position this source in your lit review. You can also add in here significance, right? This is stuff that you would use in your discussion section. And then here is a note of how this source will be used in the overall project. So Cornell notes, their function is going to be similar to an annotated bibliography, but I think that this is going to actually be more helpful to you when you're writing a more complicated piece like your research proposal, because as you can see here in these notes, there are perhaps multiple places where you might use a source. Perhaps you would cite it in the lit review and then also in the discussion. And so it helps to kind of think in your head where you might put this source, especially if it's in multiple places. Whew! All right, so we've got a lot of thinking to do, a lot of organization and planning, and 2 new sources to find to add to your lit review. So we've got a lot going on this week, but I'm just going to throw one more thing out there. Later this week, I'll be posting a discussion thread to help us brainstorm about our writing showcase presentation. If you'll remember from back before spring break, I posted a video to let you guys know more about the showcase and describe to you what we're doing. Mainly our classes, each section of my English 3010 classes, so that's 3 sections, 3 of you, we're going to each have a table. And on that table, you guys are going to be responsible for showcasing your work from English 3010. So I'll be posting a discussion thread as a place to help you guys brainstorm. This semester's theme for the writing showcase is emoda composition. So if you think emo like emotion or emojis, we're trying to get at the different ways that we engage with writing. It could be how you feel about writing, the writing process. It could be how we convey emotion, if at all, in the products that we write. How and if we can engage with our emotions online when we're writing in an online class. there's lots of possibilities. I'll post a couple of prompts for you guys in these discussion threads, and then it'll be up to you guys to kind of chat, and then we'll vote or take some kind of a poll to see which theme or which part of that theme we want to represent on our tables at the showcase. All right, hopefully everyone's having a good, if rainy, day today. And if you have any questions at all, if anything that I went over in this video seems confusing or scary or anything, please email me. If you have questions, shoot me a question. I just want to be here for you guys to support you and help you make it through our last 2 projects so that we can get through the semester and finish strong. All right, have a good week, everybody.